We're recording already?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 8 of the Left Unsaid, the podcast where we unclog the discursive drain, dislodging the stagnant metaphors and lies of official narratives, opening up the lines of free-flowing communication. I am Patrick McElwee, and I'm joined, as always, by my wife.
Hello, I'm Meg.
And my son.
Hello, I'm Finn.
This is really like the only time of the week that I really get to relax and just be me, you know?
No.
And you stick this mic in front of my face and it's like, ba-bum.
Oh my God, y'all.
Because, it's so hard. I don't know if this is true for everybody or it's just me, but like whenever I'm out and about, or especially if I'm talking to my family, we got a family reunion coming up soon.
Oh, we do. Big Irish family reunion.
So hard to get a word in edgewise. I'll start a story and then somebody's got a story of their own and they haven't waited for me to finish, or like they get distracted because they got to take care of their toddler or something.
You have like 7 seconds to make your point in your big Irish family.
But when you have a podcast, they have to listen.
It's such a hack.
It's like, it's such a life hack. Everybody should have a podcast because you can say all your stories. They can ramble on and on. They can go into all kinds of details and no one really wants to listen to. And probably people are still listening because they fell asleep or they're driving or something,
Well, I was remembering back to the days when we had little kids, and that wouldn't have been the case. Even, the idea of having a podcast back then, the kids always had some need or something to say. But now we have this 16-year-old sitting here with us on the couch. Yeah, we're here amongst all of our family's laundry and cords and microphones. And welcome to our living room. Welcome to the conversation.
Welcome to the Left Unsaid. The Left Unsaid has broken through the dam. It has overflowed the walls this week because we have gone from this little private space of podcast world, bizarro podcast world, out into the real world. We've broken loose, and we're going to be talking later in the podcast about how our very own Finn McElwee on the front page of one of the major newspapers in the Triangle region of North Carolina, the United States, and North America. And that is a major topic because very interesting things have gone down this week in his high school. And we'll be talking to the main organizer right here, right now. You get your news here first. Finn McElwee.
Exciting.
But first, a roundup of the week's political and foreign policy news.
Okay, so we're just going to start off with news that came out this morning, which is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a bit of a
Orwellian name.
It is a little bit. They're calling now, some people are calling it the Gaza, quote, Humiliation Foundation, for the U.S. and Israeli organization that is distributing aid in Gaza, or at least distributing some aid. They have set up minimal distribution points. My understanding is that Gazans are having to walk for miles to get to this aid. And the thing that happened this morning was that the Israeli soldiers and the American contractors round them up and start to distribute these boxes of aid. And the Israelis started shooting at the starving Gazans.
And the Israeli story here is that they were overrun and firing warning shots. But apparently these warning shots killed, by the accounts in the New York Times, which is often an undercount, to be honest, they killed over 20 Palestinians.
On site. That's on site. Those aren't the people who died later in hospitals. I believe it's up to 31 now. But we have a clip from a doctor who is in the emergency room in Gaza talking about what happened and what he's seen.
Today we had a mass casualty event, hundreds of injured, already dozens if not hundreds of confirmed casualties, deaths. The hospital is overwhelmed already. We're running out of ketamine, we're running out of dressings, we're running out of chest tubes. Doctors here have been doing this for the last 200 days, pardon me. They're exhausted, the resources are overwhelmed. These are all civilian casualties that were asked to go to an aid center to collect food and ended up presenting with gunshot wounds, shrapnel wounds. Most of them are critical. Some of them arrived dead on arrival because of severe targeted gunshot wounds to the head and the thorax. I've never seen anything like this. And I don't know what more there is to say. I just want to say these are civilians that were looking for food and they've been shot. And there's a lack of aid, there's a lack of food, there's a lack of supplies. Wherever you sit on the political spectrum, this is wrong. This is a humanitarian issue. This is not a political issue. These people need care, they deserve food, and they deserve aid. And that's my message to the world, Western world, Arab world, whatever the world is. If this situation can't continue, there's people dying that can't be saved. There's women, children, adults, all portions of the population are dying and they can't be saved. This is all preventable if aid was allowed in.
And so that's Dr. Ahmed Abu Swaid. He's an Australian emergency doctor, and he's at the Nasser Medical Complex. And obviously, the terrible situation that, as the doctor said, could have been prevented with normal kinds of aid distribution. But I do want to push on this question a little bit, because someone listening to this report could think that's a tragic situation. Israel lost control. Maybe they panicked and they shot at starving people who are overrunning their aid distribution site. And however horrific it is, obviously dozens of people being killed is horrific. Maybe they just need to figure out better means of humanitarian aid. What I think might be confusing to people, and was confusing to me at first, is just to figure out why the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation being run by Israel and the United States is in itself so wrong. And I think to understand that, we look at the Geneva Convention itself, the foundation of international law, and it clearly mandates in the Geneva Conventions that aid distribution in conflict zones or anywhere has to adhere to some very important principles. And there's 4 principles: impartiality, neutrality, humanity, and independence. And since 2 of the belligerents in this, Israel and their main backer, who's providing them with all the weapons, the United States, are running this foundation, it clearly violates impartiality and neutrality.
It sure does.
And there's a reason that those things were put into the Geneva Convention. Aid in these situations needs to be impartial and neutral, or else it's part of the violence of the aggression itself. And events like this will just continue to happen. And what Israel wants to do, right, by taking control of the aid distribution, it's part of their whole strategy of occupying the totality of the Gaza Strip.
Mm-hmm.
So it's inherently part of the war effort, not part of a real aid effort. And you all saw what Netanyahu said about it, right?
Yeah, he was basically like, it's just a distraction for Western countries and the global community, so we can basically continue doing our genocide.
And it's also a money-making scheme, you know?
How so?
Well, you have contractors, military contractors that are there. They're all like paying each other a bunch of money for this.
It's mercenary groups that are being charged with carrying this out in this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, so-called. All right. Well, we've got that going on. Meanwhile, there's ongoing negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Witkoff, Trump's friend, involved, as always.
Do you think Witkoff realized when he started playing golf with Trump that you know, this would escalate?
I'm sure he hoped. It can't be pleasant to play golf with Trump. I mean, like you can't imagine that like you get a lot of emotional validation hanging out with your buddy Trump. Like he's asking you how you are, how's the family. I can't imagine that happens very much.
Yeah, no.
So he must have known there was going to be some kind of payout. And I guess having the totality of the world's ills placed on your shoulders, that's the payoff that Witkoff needed. So these negotiations are going on. And again, it looks like not in good faith. The hostage families continue to be really angry at Netanyahu, who continues not to prioritize the release of the hostages. There's one interesting piece of news about the negotiations that hasn't been getting all that much attention, but Jeremy Scahill has uncovered that Hamas keeps saying as part of the negotiations that they no longer want to be the governing authority in Gaza.
Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, initially, when I brought that up to you, by the way, this is Jeremy Scahill, Dropsite News is where you can find this reporting. Initially, I had interpreted it as Hamas just wanting to lay down arms. But no, that's not the case. They're not committing to lay down arms. They are committing to pass on civilian governance, basically, of the Gaza Strip to another governing body.
That's right. Laying down arms is a red line for Hamas that they won't agree to, they say. But I think within Hamas, there's been a feeling that they made a mistake by taking over the civilian government of Gaza. And so they no longer wish to be in that position. But ironically, Israel and the United States keep taking out the clause from the draft agreement that says that Hamas will no longer be the governing authority, as if they want to keep them as the governing authority, and there's history there.
Yeah, can we talk about that a little bit? Why would they not want that in a ceasefire agreement?
I'm speculating here, but I would assume it has something to do with, them wanting to use it as cover to destroy the civilian infrastructure in Gaza and use it as an excuse to keep doing their genocide.
I mean, you do see that in all of the talking points of the Zionists. This one is the most in the forefront, right? Which is, but Hamas, like Hamas, they are always focusing on that. It's the preferred enemy, right? It gives them something to pin this on so they can have sort of an excuse to continue the carnage and the oppression of the Palestinian people. Is that your feeling about it too, Patrick?
Yeah, we have history here. We have history from Netanyahu himself, the prime minister of Israel, who has bragged that he supported Hamas as a way to undermine the possibility of the establishment of a Palestinian state, so what everybody calls the two-state solution, by putting Hamas, who has an Islamic ideology at the forefront of governance. They could create a civil conflict between Palestinians because Hamas was set up against the other major political party within Palestine, which is Fatah. And Fatah is the party that's aligned and associated with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is a secular form of resistance and form of political organization. By making it Hamas, they put an Islamic face on the Palestinian resistance, which lets them sort of, in the Western mind, lump it together with all other kinds of...
Al-Qaeda, say.
Al-Qaeda, ISIS, etc., and lump it all in as Islamic terrorism, as those fanatics.
Interesting.
That can't be reasoned with, and definitely can't be given a state of their own. So perhaps that's the case. I mean, I don't really know what Gaza looks like, where Hamas remains the major armed force, but there's a civilian governance. I mean, it's a little bit like the model of Lebanon, right? Where you have Hezbollah, who's not officially part of the Lebanese government. Well, maybe is partially officially part of the Lebanese government, but is a major military force separate from the Lebanese government. And I could see reasons why that might not be what Israel wants to see happen either.
All right, so there's been some back and forth. Jeremy Scahill reported that Witkoff, via a pro-Trump Palestinian U.S. citizen, I believe, right, is speaking directly with Hamas and had drafted a ceasefire agreement. And then Witkoff's team goes back to Israel and within a few days comes back with something else that's quite different. Yeah,
that's certainly the allegations that Hamas is making, that they keep getting close to agreements with the United States, but then the United States talks to Israel and completely change the terms of debate.
And I think that one main thing that Hamas has wanted is for the U.S. to guarantee that the ceasefire will hold, and that in these negotiations, Netanyahu and the Israeli government does not want to guarantee that. They're looking more or less for a temporary ceasefire and the ability to continue on at will.
Yeah, so I think that we're seeing a pattern that's continued for a while. So sadly, there doesn't seem to be any real hope of immediate breakthrough there, but sometimes we're wrong. Hopefully we will be. Meg, you turned up this news report. So we hear a lot about how allegations from pro-Israel folks that the reason the civilian death toll in Gaza is so outrageously high is because Hamas is using civilians as human shields.
Mm-hmm. They'll go as far as to say that if you see pictures of dead children and attacks and whatnot, these are all basically not actually happening, that there is just propaganda from Hamas that is leaking online. And anyway, I find that hard to get my head around, that kind of denialism.
It's outrageous in so many accounts, and also it serves to shield them from accountability for obvious war crimes like bombing every single hospital inside of Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me, the position that, because Hamas is using civilians as human shields, it's okay for Israel to mow them down, even though, there's absolutely no evidence of Hamas doing that in any kind of systematic way. But, we have seen Israel in the West Bank and parts of Gaza, use Palestinians as human shields.
Yes, and actually there's a new investigation. The AP has reported, along with 972 magazine, Haaretz, and the Red Cross, documenting how Palestinians have been used as human shields to inspect buildings, tunnels, and other sites in Gaza and the West Bank. And so we have here a clip from Nadav Weinman. He's a former Israeli soldier from an organization called Breaking the Silence, talking about this report.
So this is from Breaking the Silence, and we got this through Democracy Now!
From the beginning of this war, we got testimonies from soldiers that told us they were ordered by senior officers to grab Palestinians next to them and to use them as human shields, meaning that they were ordered to send Palestinians. Some of them were dressed up with IDF uniform. Some of them had GoPro cameras on their head or on their chest. And then they were sent into tunnels and houses to check that there isn't any IEDs or explosive over there, so the soldier could enter safely or clear the area. And we got testimonies from different units, different times, and different places in the Gaza Strip. Now, the protocol is quite simple. You need that individual with you for a period of time, 2 days, 3 days, a week, 3 weeks. So it means that only when he's scanning a tunnel or a house or an alley, so he doesn't have handcuffs or a blindfold. The rest of the time, when he's with you inside the house, we have a testifier that called them a sub-army of slaves. That connects to something a lot bigger in the Israeli society, and that's dehumanization of Palestinians, right? Since October 7th, it's even on steroids, right? We have government members that openly talking about genocide, right? You know, we have ministers saying there isn't any innocent in Gaza, that all of the Palestinians are assisting terror or terrorists by themselves.
I mean, talk about, every accusation is a confession. It's, clearly a war crime on top of many, many other war crimes being committed by Israel. And, just the fact that we have all this evidence, and testimony from former Israeli soldiers that Israel systematically uses Palestinians as human shields. And yet, we see nothing about that in the Western press, even still with, this recent slight tide shift in the narrative. There's plenty of things about Hamas supposedly using Palestinians and whole hospitals and schools as human shields, but nothing about this extensive reporting.
Yeah, it shows you how these narratives take root in the media and just get repeated endlessly. And other ones, the media is completely Teflon to even accepting them. So we're going to come back around to Gaza in a few minutes here when we talk about what happened with Finn here at his local high school. We just want to flag a couple other developments that have been happening around the world to keep your eye on. It looks like peace talks between the United States and Iran are coming to a possible inflection point. The UN nuclear watchdog called the IAEA, which does investigations on the state of Iranian nuclear enrichment, has released a report saying that Iran has gone significantly further in enriching uranium towards weapons-grade uranium. Now, for those of us who've been around for a long time, this kind of report has been happening for about 20 years now, with a pause after President Barack Obama negotiated a peace agreement with Iran. When Trump took office the first time, he tore up that peace agreement. And the Biden administration wasn't able to, or didn't want to, pick that back up and negotiate a newer agreement. So we've been without an agreement with Iran for over 8 years. But Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and so is open to nuclear inspectors from the United Nations. This report has raised alarms among many people, good actors and bad faith actors alike, that Iran could be closer to being able to build a nuclear weapon. Obviously, from my perspective, and I think most people's perspective, nuclear proliferation is not a good thing for the world. But one could understand why Iran might feel the need for a nuclear weapon, and certainly the United States and Israel understands why Iran might want a nuclear weapon, both of them having nuclear weapons themselves. And so the pressure is ramping up to get some kind of agreement to prevent Iranians from enriching uranium any further. We should also mention that Iranians have the right to enrich uranium under the treaties that they're parties to. You're allowed to have enriched uranium in order to have nuclear power plants. Right after this report came out, the Trump administration, again, through Steve Witkoff,
Steve, such a busy bee.
Presented Iran with a written proposal that they're telling Iran to either take or leave. And coming up very soon, the Europeans, because of the inner functions of the European Parliament, have a deadline to decide whether to impose or continue sanctions on Iran. So those peace talks with Iran are moving very quickly. We may be coming to a moment where there's going to be decisions being taken one way or the other towards signing some kind of agreement, perhaps in Iran towards moving to build a nuclear weapon, perhaps in the United States and Israel toward attacking Iran, which would obviously run the risk of igniting a cataclysmic war with a country that actually has a military, unlike the Palestinians, who are basically defenseless.
Right.
It would be very different for Israel to attack Iran, who has modern weaponry with which to respond, than it has been for them to relentlessly attack a virtually defenseless population for a year and a half. So look out for that. We also have been seeing the conflict in Ukraine ramping up. Sadly, there was some hope that one of the silver linings of the Trump administration would be that we'd see some kind of peace in that region.
Hubris.
Yeah, whether it was a good kind of peace or a bad kind of peace, maybe at least people would stop dying in such enormous numbers. But we have now seen both Russia with its escalated attacks on Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, and now just today, we're recording this on Sunday, reports that Ukraine has been bombing much deeper into Russia.
Oh, is there anything good happening in the world?
Yeah, and at the same time, you've got Trump going, "No, please, Vladimir, that's not nice. Please stop, Vladimir."
And that's our roundup. Bum, 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 ba-dum, bum.
Our daughter, we had the episode playing for a little bit, just to check on audio levels and make sure it was all uploaded properly. And she walks in, she's 11, and she's like, do we have to listen to this? It's like so depressing. So we're going to have like a good news clip at the end of this. I don't know. Actually, you know what? I feel like this entire next segment where we're going to talk to Finn about the local activism that he has done, I feel like this is the good news that we are all needing.
Absolutely. Because, in the midst of all this chaos and horrific violence, there is the capacity for human solidarity.
And empathy and care.
And
care
love.
for it's really heartening. So maybe we should segue into Finn's little adventure.
Tell us what happened this week.
Yeah, so on Thursday, a couple of days ago, we had a walkout for Palestine at my school, Chapel Hill High School. I was on the organizing committee, and it went quite well. We had around 50 students get up in the middle of class and walk out into the woods. But yeah, it was quite interesting.
All right, so tell us, how did this come about? How did this come to be?
Well, a group of students came together. This was during the time where Israel's complete blockade on humanitarian aid was really getting to incredible level and a really, really unacceptable level. And I think students in the high school were feeling a lot of that. And so we kind of just felt the pressure to act. Like I mentioned, we got a few students together, started organizing, planning the date, getting social media up about it. We put up some posters.
I'm curious if you can give a little bit of a background of the environment at your school when it comes to the topic of the Middle East and what some people like to call just in neutral, like the conflict in the Middle East. What's the vibe? Are you all allowed to talk about it? Are you discussing current events in school? What's going on with that?
Obviously, it varies from teacher to teacher and class to class. But from my experience and from what I've heard a lot of other people's experiences, it's been a very suppressing and just almost, oppressive environment surrounding discussions on what's happening in Gaza. A lot of, our administration and by extension, our teachers are scared to talk about this topic. There are obviously feeling the influence of a lot of Zionist organizations that are kind of around this point getting really desperate to try to defend their favorite genocidal state. And a couple in particular are attacking the school. They recently got a class that I'm in that, very briefly mentions Israel-Palestine. They got it discontinued. And that was kind of the only class where students get more than a couple of minutes history, that the actual history there and the actual roots of the conflict beyond just going back to October 7th. And, clearly that's unacceptable to these Zionists. And I think it's unacceptable that our administration just folded to them like that. It's really disappointing to me to see these Zionists who aren't even parents or connected to the school or anything like that have so much sway over the administration.
So what kind of sway do they bring locally? Like, what are they doing to influence the administration?
Well, I know they have various tactics. They like to sometimes go through official means and request information that teachers use to teach Israel, Palestine, and the resources that they use. And obviously with the wink, wink, we're going to dox you and try to get you deported or whatever.
Yeah, it always seems like it's under this cloud of repression happening elsewhere, plus their connections to very important donors like Art Pope here in North Carolina. He's sort of our local Charles Koch, our rich Republican donor in North Carolina. Folks like that, right?
Yeah. He supports a lot of them. There are a lot of other mostly Christian Zionists that donate to these organizations and fuel these efforts. Another tactic they like to use is just sending out mass emails. Some organizations tried to do that to get the administration to stop or restrict our walkout.
And I'd love to ask you, because it always seems to me like they are prioritizing, and I think with reason, they're prioritizing the emotional well-being of students in the school who have emotional ties to Israel or who wrongly misinterpret pro-Palestinian or anti-genocide speech as being anti-Semitic. Even if those students are misguided, obviously they do deserve emotional support from the administration, but they're overlooking the emotional well-being of all the kids who see a genocide unfolding in real time on their telephones and all the adults in their life being silent about it. So I want to ask you about what exactly the students who participated in your walkout said. But I guess maybe just stepping back, what did you originally want to do? Was going into the woods the plan the whole time?
No, we had an original date planned, and we told the school a couple of days before, and they were like, "Oh, is it possible that we can push it back a week so we can just prepare and make sure everything's safe and whatever?" And we were like, "Sure, that's fine, whatever." So we pushed it back a week, and we were planning to work with them to do it on school grounds.
And I think your understanding was by pushing it back, you then would be able to do it on school grounds.
Yeah, that was our understanding. But then after we pushed it back, they kind of came in with a different line and were like, you're going to have to submit all your materials to us. And I was like, okay, fine. That's, whatever. We're not being anti-Semitic or anything. But then they said that because there was a walkout that I didn't organize but attended last year.
As a freshman?
As a freshman, yeah. And they apparently used the word genocide. And after that, some rabbis and other Zionist figures in the community came in and lectured my administration about the, quote, implications of the word genocide. And so the administration said that they were going to, in that process, challenge our use of the word genocide.
Yeah, I think claiming that it wasn't factual or something.
Yeah, they claimed that it wasn't factual. They even claimed that it was language that could start a riot and likened it to the legal principle, you might call it, of shouting fire in a crowded building.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. And then, so you brought in some evidence to back up why exactly you think what's happening in Gaza is a genocide.
Yeah, I printed off the almost 300-page report by Amnesty International that concluded Israel was committing a genocide.
And that report came out in December 2024. So think about everything that's happened since then. I mean, this wasn't this mass starvation event that we're seeing. This human-made famine hadn't ramped up at that point. It's so damning.
Yeah. And anyway, after I did that, our principal was like, I didn't say that you couldn't say that word, by the way, just that, to be careful about your language or whatever. But in that process, we were kind of made aware that our free speech would be, subject to excess scrutiny.
So because you wanted to have an open mic, right? That was part of your organizational sort of principles, is that you were providing a space for people to talk about their experiences?
Yeah, we did want to have an open mic. And obviously that doesn't really work with wanting to have everything that's going to be said or any sign or writing that's going to be there be pre-approved. And that combined with a couple of other things, like they wouldn't let us have it in view of the press or anything like that because they said they didn't have enough security personnel.
And do you feel like the motivations of other students coming out was anti-Semitic?
It's a ridiculous claim. One of our organizers, who's a great person, is Jewish, and I know there were at least a few other Jewish students in attendance at the walkout. But, even if there weren't, none of this speech is anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic to say you don't want kids to be killed, or that you oppose a genocide. If anything, claiming that the state of Israel is tied to Judaism, as we heard from a speech our Jewish organizer gave, is really damaging to them. You're telling them that your identity is connected to what they see as this terrible act. And, I'm sure that makes it very hard, and it's a very hard thing to go through. People always telling you that and insisting on that.
And also challenging, for your co-organizer, I can imagine that they feel that, because they also get attacks from the Zionist community, and it was clear to me that they have a strong faith, and to have that sort of challenged and sort of ripped from you. It's sort of mind-boggling to me, growing up Catholic, where, you have a church and you have people who are on all sides of the political spectrum. And you just know that that's what it is. And nobody claims that the other people aren't Catholic. They're just either right-wing or left-wing. And you have this sort of the political spectrum that exists within this faith. And yes, sure, are there disagreements? Absolutely. There are always disagreements. But to think of someone like your co-organizer being attacked for being against indiscriminate bombing and killing of civilians is just so sad to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous.
All right, so you negotiated with the administration. You found their restrictions on your speech to be too onerous to stay on campus. So you walked across the street into the woods. How'd it go?
It went great. As I mentioned, we had about 50 students stand up and walk out during class. These are people who had to stand up in front of their peers, which they had, known and been around the whole year, and say, I think that what Israel is doing is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to kill over 17,000 children. And, that's a pretty brave thing to do. It requires a lot of moral courage. And so we were really happy with the turnout. We had some amazing speeches. The open mic part went great. We had students who, really seemed to appreciate the opportunity to be with people who also saw this as a, terrible genocide that needs to be opposed, rather than just being told to ignore it again and again by adults in their life, by their parents, by teachers, by administrators, etc.
Yeah, I was so struck by some of the testimonials of the kids. Meg and I went as marshals just to support the kids as they had to walk out campus.
Yeah, and in part, I will say, we weren't anticipating going. We were just kind of letting you all do your thing. the principal, who seems to really, like you, Finn, but he called us up and it seemed to me like he was trying to warn us that there might be counter-protesters there.
And he also let us know that he had alerted law enforcement. So we didn't quite know what that meant, given that we've seen many images of law enforcement, tackling students at college campuses. We didn't expect that kind of thing, but we just wanted to be a presence.
Yeah, so we reached out. We had a handful of folks from the peace community here.
So we got to
just to keep everyone safe.
So we got to witness what the kids were saying to each other, and I just was so moved by how lonely it's been for the past year and a half for many of these kids who don't have adults in their lives, who are really grappling with what's happening in Gaza, who are being told after seeing horrific images, after reading that it's so overwhelmingly happening to the Palestinians.
With money that is coming from the U.S., from us taxpayers.
But being told by adults who, for whatever reason, don't really want to take a hard look at the realities of what's going on, that they shouldn't take a stand, that there's sort of bad people on both sides and both sides have some part that's wrong. And so you shouldn't take too hard an issue because it's not really your concern. The kinds of things that those of us who speak up against a genocide hear regularly, that these things were painful to these kids. And I could just see that you had opened up a space that allowed them to heal, to express solidarity, to express just anguish together. And I'm hopeful that then gives them the power to go out and start trying to make the change that we all need to be making.
I'm here today because I refuse to be in a generation that ignores genocide. We should have learned from past genocides. We should have learned from the Holocaust.
It feels hard when there are people telling you to shut up and that nothing's actually happening. It's important to remember that there are countless individuals, millions across the world, who don't support this at all. Like, we're not the minority.
Even though I feel like I'm just one person, I'm here because I want to try and make a difference, no matter how small it is, because everyone deserves support.
And I will also say, a lot of the kids there were from marginalized communities in your high school, and hearing them get up and speak, there's clearly empathetic kids who care, kids who feel deeply.
I feel like there's been like a feeling in my stomach for months that's just like, I don't know, it's kind of indescribable. It's just like, I don't know, the weight of everything that's happening to these people. I'm disgusted that we sit every day in a school that thinks that what we're doing right now is punishable. It's not. We should all be very proud to be here. I'm also here because I grew up with a lot of people who came from Palestine, and I have a connection to the culture. And it hurts.
One young woman who is of Latina background just got up and started talking with no prepared speech. And she just said, I am just so afraid. I'm afraid. I see the Palestinians and I see their pain and suffering, and I'm worried about my family. Like, it's happening to them. It's happening to us.
I just feel a lot of emotions knowing that all of this is going on, and my voice is shaking right now because I'm really scared. The one thing that I do notice a lot is that pro-Palestinian protesters are labeled anti-Semitic and prosecuted by the government for speaking out on what is right. And I want to say that standing up isn't wrong, that what we are doing isn't racist. Knowing that this happens and could happen to my family as well, even though I'm not Palestinian and I don't have Palestinian family, I know that it could happen in the near future. And it may be overshadowed like Palestine, the crisis in Palestine is being right now. I really like that a lot of people showed up for this. And I'm glad to see that there are good people with good morals in our school.
Like, they see these things as intertwined, right? This oppression that's happening in our country as being intertwined.
And hopefully the example of you all doing the walkout leads to more such actions among these kids and wherever they can act in their lives. And I will say, like, for us, for your parents, watching you do this and then, being worried for you, being impressed by you, et cetera, it's activated us in our local community. It's made us realize just how isolated students who care about the Palestinian genocide, whether it's because they're Palestinian or because they have some other connection to Palestine, or it's because they're just compassionate human beings who see what's happening, how their emotional needs aren't being met in the schools, and how the administration is fearful, A, of what could happen to them if they allow this real honest discussion of what's happening in Palestine, and B, are just getting so much pressure and are getting the Zionist viewpoint constantly being hammered into them at every turn, that we need to show up. And so Meg and I have been working on showing up more to our school administration. Finn is our oldest. We've got 2 more kids coming up through the school district, and the superintendents, the principals, the school board need to be hearing from parents and community members who have an interest in kids being able to openly discuss the important issues, including the important moral issues like standing up for Palestine right now. It's been amazing because of Finn's activism. I guess you could talk about the article you got in the local newspaper in the Indie Week. Incredible article, but because of things like this, we've just been getting much deeper connections to people in our community who care about peace in Palestine, community members, grandparents, peace activists, teachers, and we're starting to pull people together into a group. We're not quite sure what we're going to call it, maybe Carborough Chapel Hill Parents Against Genocide for Peace. We're not quite sure. But if you're listening and you're local and you want to get involved, email us info@theleftunsaid.net and we'll add you to that. But Finn, you want to talk about the media response?
Yeah, we got this really amazing article about it and that Indie Week, which is kind of a local, more progressive news outlet by Lena Geller, who's pretty amazing local journalist. And I've had people reach out to me from, other schools in the area and be like, this is amazing. I'm glad to see you guys did this. And even all over the country, we've had some interactions with college students who, were in the encampment movement. And so it's been pretty amazing to see the reaction to this. And I just hope that, it inspires other people to see that they can do this. It's a lot less hard than you would think. If anyone out there is thinking about doing something like this, I would say just go ahead and do it. It's not an easy thing to decide to do, but once you decide to do it, you can make it happen. And I guarantee you there's a lot more people out there who support what you're doing than you might originally think.
And it's just so amazing to hear people's gratitude when they hear somebody else speaking up. There's a Palestinian mom here in the district who also was feeling so alone and said that you really made her day by speaking up and even seeing other parents in the district speaking up. Do you want to give the trolls a little bit of attention? I thought you had a really nice response to one of your trolls out there. Do you feel like bringing that up on the air?
Sure.
You got a troll, and she put her full name on here. We haven't verified who she is. We think she might be local, but we don't really know, so we won't say who we think she might be. But the name on this comment is Jessica Milstein. And she says, Little Finn and Zev is your Jewish fellow co-organizer. Little Finn and Zev have bright futures in the propaganda puppet circus. As a Jew, I'm very disappointed that Zev seems to know so little about Israel, and poor Finn, who can't even vote yet, and is clearly lacking in critical thinking skills, using the word apocalyptic when talking about Gaza. He's clearly never heard the saying, play with the bull, you get the horns. I'm glad the administration took the stance they did. They've got more of a backbone than most universities. To me, the fact that these tools took their little protest off campus because they couldn't be openly anti-Semitic on campus just show they're wrong. So you weighed in, Finn. What'd you say?
Yeah. So a little background. I'm making a documentary about this experience and also like the broader area of repression and methods of repression in high schools around Palestine. So I replied to Jessica and I said, "Hi, Jessica, Finn here. I'm making a documentary about this event and would love to get your perspective. That is, if you want to articulate your position rather than just posting about high schoolers on the internet. Let me know how I can contact you to set up an interview. Sadly, Jessica did not respond.
Not yet. So, it's all upside, really. I mean, because if you get trolls, you get to troll them back. It's actually a lot of fun. Finn's pretty good at it.
Yeah, it's hard, too, I would say. It's not all easy. We've had an acquaintance of ours who, it turns out, is progressive except for Palestine, reach out and feel disappointed in us and in the students. But what's kind of strikes me about that is that they're calling, no matter what, they're always calling for repression of speech on these students. That's their answer to everything. They may have some lip service to the idea of conversation, but that again is not happening in the high schools, right, Finn? You aren't having seminars where you discuss this. It's not coming up in the curricula. It's being shut down.
And they should be. I mean, even if you don't think it's a genocide by whatever metric, you ought to be open to the fact that if it's possibly one, that the kids ought to be discussing it, especially because a core part of the curriculum is the Holocaust and the lessons of never again. So this should be obviously discussed, and everyone should be supporting that. So the news is out. Finn's working on a documentary. If you know something about making documentaries, or you want to get involved, or you have some advice for us, again, info@leftunsaid.net. It's a first time. I mean, Finn's made some documentaries, but I think you're trying to level it up. So we're all ears for the advice if you've got experience in this field.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we'll link to that article about the walkout in Indie Week. And I think we're going to tie up our episode 8 right there. We feel really good about putting some boots on the ground, doing some work in the area. It just feels like we've got an expanding community here based on it. And yeah, again, I can't highly recommend it enough.
Because what's going on in the world right now in various places is morally traumatic for us. And to be witnessing and hearing all these things that are happening and to feel powerless to do something is a hard thing to move through as a human. And so we've found, as this little nuclear family here, that, like you said, Patrick, putting the boots on the ground and taking definitive actions, and I will say, like, more than just leaving a comment, gathering with people, building a community locally of people who have the same moral foundation as you do is such a wonderful thing.
And if you're still listening to this podcast, we consider you to be part of our community. We would love to hear from you. We can't see who's listening out there. So please, you could leave us a comment if you want to. You can leave us a review. That's obviously helpful. But more than that, send us an email, info@theleftunsaid.net. There's also a place where you can sign up for our mailing list at theleftunsaid.net. We want to build that mailing list because we all know we can't trust these platforms. We don't know how much longer they're going to allow us to communicate with each other on Instagram or on X or on any of these other platforms that we already know it's quite difficult. And so we feel like email is one of those less controlled mediums. So please sign up there. Let us know you're listening, and we look forward to speaking at you again in a week.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
See you.